开始这样。那现在这一轨是阿万轨。那今天的讲者是这个廖伟涵 Adrian，那他今天要带来的讲题是educational code reviews。那介绍一下讲者，那讲者目前是高中生，那他在家自学这样子。那最近因为一些事情，所以他在家自学也延毕了，对。那他是一个对 Python 很有经验的一个开发者。那在去年的时候，也有在我们 PyCon Taiwan R0的地方讲那个PDF 的这个使用 Python 来处理 PDF。那今天他带给我们就是 educational code review， 就是介绍一下说面对学生的时候应该要怎么样的来做 code reviews。Okay, so our speaker Adrian is a homeschooling student, and he has very much Python develop experience. And the previous time on PyCon TW, and he talking about the PDF using Python to manipulate PDF. And this time he will talk about educational code reviews for students. Okay, so 那我们就热烈的掌声欢迎我们的讲者 Adrian。
Hi. Who does code reviews? You do code reviews. Who likes code reviews? Who doesn't like code reviews? Who enjoys PyCon so far? You better raise your hands. Come on. Yeah. All right. All right. So code reviews. Code reviews happens everywhere. As a software developer, we do code reviews as our job. It happens in open source projects, and it happens everywhere. So usually, it takes place when you're trying to merge two code bases. There's one master code base, which is maintained by someone, and you made some changes, and you are asking this maintainer to say, hey, I made these changes. Do you want to merge it into the master code base? And so that's when typically a code review takes in place. And as this talk has a Python level set to novice, I'm going to give the super novice Python code. And that's the only Python code you're going to see today. It's the only one. And if you want to hear more about Python, please feel free to leave the room. I won't stop you. Well, I will stop you. Yeah. But so let's say we have this piece of code, and how a code review works is that as a project owner, I will give some comments on the code. And for this example, I'm saying that this function, it should have a more descriptive function name. And that's typically a code review. That's how a typical code review works. And why? Why we do code reviews? So first of all, it ensures the quality of the code. Of course, it's not going to prevent any bugs that is probably going to happen in the application, but it's going to prevent some obvious logic errors. And it syncs between the team members. So if we are in the same team, I know what you're doing because I viewed your code. You know what I'm doing because you viewed my code. But most importantly, you learn from code reviews. Who thinks you learn from code reviews? Raise your hand. That's quite a lot. All right, so that's mostly what today's talk is going to be about. So hi everyone, my name is Liaw. And if you find it difficult to pronounce, you can just call me Adrian. You can find me on Twitter through @AdrianL2000, or on GitHub, my account is AdrianL. You may know me from the Python community. I'm a speaker at previous PyCon Taiwan, and this year I'm serving as the program chair at PyCon Taiwan. So I'm really, really sorry about giving the most Python unrelated topic throughout the whole PyCon. Yeah. And I do classical piano for my interest in my spare time. And if you are into classical music and you want to do some like collaborative chamber music or something, please feel free to talk to me afterwards. You may know me from about education. Currently, I'm a homeschooled high school senior. And so as a homeschool student, I have like pretty different learning experience from a typical student. And I've been constantly changing between a student or a teacher, a mentor, or a tutor, or an assistant. So I like to observe how people learn, and that's why I want to present this talk. And I am a former project reviewer at Udacity. Udacity is a online course platform where you can take like paid courses. And at that time, I was paid for doing code reviews. So they pay you and you do code reviews for their students. You get feedbacks to their code, and then you get paid. So that's when I learned most of the things I'm going to talk about today. All right. So let's go back to the code review I mentioned earlier. So what's wrong with this code review? Now, actually, it is a perfect code review. There's nothing wrong with this code review. It doesn't violate most of the golden rules of code reviews. It talks about code. It points out where it should be improved. It doesn't sound very opinionated. But this is more of what I call a peer review sort of code review. And for educational code reviews, which I'm going to talk about today, there's a really, really big difference on your mindset as a reviewer. Is that you have to motivate your students. This is the most important concept as a reviewer when you're doing an educational code review. So both educational code reviews and what I call a peer code review, they both do the same thing. It's going to find something that the person is not doing very well. It's going to find it's going to find some of the mistakes from the code, and it's going to you have to suggest some changes to the code. You're going to give some opinions on their code, but for educational code review, because you're facing students, but as a student, when you're learning, it requires motivation to keep learning. And that's why it makes educational code review different than peer code review. So I have some tips on making successful educational code reviews. First of all, compliment. You want to compliment the student on what they're doing well. find something that they do awesome. Find something they did really well. And don't just say like, overall, it's good. Overall, it's great. Overall, LGTM. And find something in particular that they maybe spend a little more effort on it. Find some good function usages that the student uses, complement them. And be personalized. So yeah, you have to find something that is particularly, the student is particularly doing it. You find something and complement it. And I usually use some phrases like, great job on doing so. And I really like that you do something and that is outstanding. So be sure to do some compliments before you're trying to correct the things that they do wrong. And feel free to just exaggerate. Sometimes if you exaggerate the compliment, it actually makes students feel good, and it's going to motivate them to move forward. So do some compliments before anything. The second one, empathize. So you have to admit that doing something is difficult. As a student, the student feels difficult when they're trying to write this piece of code. Think of when you just started to learn some programming languages. When you don't know how to use a syntax, and you're trying to use it, and you're not sure what you're doing well, what you're doing bad. So that's difficult to students. And instead of saying, no, this is wrong, this is the correct way to do it, yes, you have to say that. You have to say that it's better to do something instead of something. And then you have to say, don't feel bad to not being able to understand this. We all know that understanding it takes a lot more effort than we just thought. So admit that it is difficult after a series of correction. And these are some of the phrases I like to use to motivate the students. So like, believe me, you can do it as well. I've gone through this. I believe that you can do it well. So we have compliment, we have empathize. Now, guide the student. This is very different than peer code reviews. When you're doing peer code reviews, you usually just point out where it's wrong and suggest a better way to do it. But as a student, you might want to learn how to, try searching for some resources by yourself. Usually they don't tell you like, you have to learn this or I have to learn this. It happens naturally. So as a mentor, you have to tell the student to, you can try Googling something. You can try Google these keywords. These are the keywords that you may find useful. I'm not going to tell you what the solution is, but these are the keywords that you can use, and they're really useful. You may going to find a solution, but please come up by yourself. So yeah, these are, again, the phrases that I like to use to my students. I encourage you to try searching something. I challenge you to try out blah, blah, blah. And I encourage you to challenge to play around with some function, and I encourage you to give to try giving it some different parameters and see how the output affects, and then apply the knowledge you learned back to your code base. And so that is something that is pretty particularly to educational code reviews. Explain. You really have to explain why for everything. After you actually corrected something that the student is doing wrong, or doing incorrectly, doing it improperly, violating the convention, or anything like that, explain why. There's a reason behind every single thing. So if we're trying to say use this function instead of that function, explain why. For example, if you're a pandas user, you may know that it's almost always better to use the vectorized operations over doing for loops. Why? Because the underlying computation is done by NumPy, by C. And it's going to be performing faster. And also, your code is going to look clear. And you can explain why for almost everything, from variable naming, from refactoring. Say, I ask a student to refactor something. I may going to ask the student to actually ask the student to refactor something, and I will explain why. Because refactoring these such code base, you're going to reduce a lot of repetitive code, and by refactoring those, you can use the refactored one in other places in your code, and that's going to make your code clearer. Also, I like to use a phrase that it may not seem obvious at first, but something. So please, when you're doing code review, think why and explain it. Last but not least, connect. Connect the student to the world. What I mean by that is that you want to connect the student with some great articles, to some great videos, to great resources that they can use to improve what they're doing. And also explain why you're connecting them to such resources. I suggest you check out this great article. It explains some concept very well. I encourage you to watch this talk by somebody talking about event loops. It's going to empower your understanding of event loops, and it's going to help you develop your understanding of asynchronous programming, for example. So we've talked about compliments. We talked about empathizing. We've talked about guiding and what's the last one? Explaining, connect. Sorry, I only slept for 1.5 hours last night for doing this. But as a reviewer, the thing that I realize the most is that these educational code reviews is not about like changing what kind of issue, what kind of actual issue that you're finding out from the code. But actually, what you're changing the most is your tone and language. Just change the way you speak, and it's going to change a lot. but it always takes patience. It takes a lot of patience, and you got to be patient to review a piece of code, 100 lines of messy code by a beginner programmer, and give him, you have to find something that they do well in this 100 lines of messy code and give them compliments. And you have to change the way you talk when you're doing code review, when you're responding to this 100 lines of messy code. So it takes patience. And it takes practice. It takes practice a lot. I didn't do a really good code review when I first started to do code reviews. I didn't know how. When I was looking at a piece of code, and then I didn't know what to do because it's messy, and I didn't know how to read it. And even though it is a piece of code by an expert, I didn't have an idea of how to read it, how to trace it or something. And it takes practice. And also, using great tone and language, it also takes practice. You have to practice how to actually use those techniques that I mentioned earlier to actually make good educational code reviews. And it takes passion. When you don't have passion, then you're probably going to stop reviewing a piece of code. So overall, I think it's like people who write some awesome code, they don't necessarily know how to teach well, and it takes practice. And you're not going to make good code reviews at your first time. It always takes practice. And I encourage you to do more practices by reviewing some beginner programmer that you let them into the programming world, review the code of him, give him some compliments, find out where they can improve, and then try to motivate them. So if we go back to the code review, the piece of code that I mentioned in the beginning, how can I improve the code review? So keep in mind that the only thing that I think is should be improved is the functioning. It should have a more descriptive functioning. So what would I say to this program, to somebody who wrote this program? First of all, I would say, great job. Great job that your program actually prints out PyCon Taiwan 2018 is awesome for 10 times now. I really think that PyCon Taiwan 2018 is really awesome. Who thinks PyCon Taiwan 2018 is awesome? Woo! Woo! Who enjoys the lunch? Which flavor should I get? Joking. So great job. However, I would argue that it would be better if you can rename the function. It may not be obvious at the moment, but name a function based on the functionality actually boosts the readability of your code as you start to use it all the way in your code. And finally, I would say it's almost perfect. It's almost perfect. it's just a tiny bit away from perfect piece of code for doing this. Well done as a Python beginner. And I am really excited to see your next update on this piece of code. And that makes students feel well, and they actually learn something without feeling bad. So that's all from my speech. Thank you everyone for listening. I am going to have actually an open space event on tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow, and it's going to be about the same time as this time. I suggest you to check out the open space board that is at the side of the registration desk, where you get some, the T-shirts, your badges, yeah, things like that. It's just near there, and I'm also tweeting on Twitter, and you can see like all the updates about open spaces. Thank you, everyone. Please enjoy the rest of PyCon Taiwan.
好，那我们谢谢 Adrian 的这个演讲。那不知道各位有没有什么问题想要问他的呢？如果有问题的话，就是可以举手，然后发问。那边，请。
So do you suggest we all use the same tone as an educational reviewer in all kind of conditions?
So the question is, do I suggest that you always use the same tone in every single educational code reviews? So I do think it's well, unless you're trying to like stop the student from learning something. Yeah, it's like my friend who's know nothing about programming, and he asked me like, oh, what language should I learn? And he's like, should I learn Python or C? And I was like, since I don't have time to answer your questions, just learn C. That's something that you shouldn't do. So I would say yes. I would suggest to do it always, and it definitely helps. It definitely builds confidence for students. But always you have to find some personalized way to do code reviews on some particular students. You change the way according to different person, different student that you're teaching. For example, if some student is using some function too often, you may not going to compliment them on good use of some function. I mean, if the function is used too often that you think it's not appropriate, or something like that. But just find a personalized way to do it to different students. But generally, I think it's good to keep the tone. What I was talking about was the content, the actual content, the issues that you're finding from their code. But I think the tone is probably always the same. But actually, in my case, I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to respond to that, because when I was doing code review for Udacity, the student is anonymous to me, so I don't know who the student is. So I always use the same tone, and they usually give me good feedbacks saying that, well, I got motivated. I feel, well, yeah, I motivated someone. Yeah.
OK， 好，那我们时间应该还可以再1到2个提问，不知道有没有人要？
一个就好。
一个就好。好，
我是有可能就是如果时间就是我觉得是回答时间要太久的话，就可能就
OK。好，那还有最后一个问题，还有人要询问的吗？
没有。
OK， 那请。
Udacity 的 code reviewer？
So the question is how to become a Udacity reviewer. You can actually email them to there's an email for that they accept some accepts the reviewer application, and you're going to go through a program that teaches you how to do it well. And actually, it talks more deeply than what I was talking about today. It talks a lot about like growth mindset, the mindset things, and things like pedagogy, like that. Yeah, and you have to do like several example code reviews, and people from Udacity is going to review your code review. They're going to give reviews on your code review to someone's code. So that's a complicated process, and you have to go through like several times, and then eventually you can get the certificate for being a Udacity code reviewer.
OK， 好，那时间也差不多到，那我们再一次掌声谢谢 Adrian 今天带给我们的演讲。